introduction? Did you want to do just a self-introduction?
Do you want this? You can have this one. I'm not.
I think we'll get started.
I don't need yours.
So I just want you to know that I'm glad to see so many people here in this session. This is Parkinson's 101 and rock steady boxing as an effective intervention. If you're not for this group, then you need to find your group, but that's what we're going to be doing in here. I'll introduce myself first. That my name is Lora. I'm a physical therapist, 41 years being a physical therapist, mostly in long-term care. You know, you do a lot of things over your career. So of course I've done hospital work, assisted living, home health, children. I don't know if there's anything else or not, but most of my years have been in long-term care primarily. Right now I just work PRN, which of course you know is as needed, so I don't work steady hours anymore, but mostly in the Champaign area as I'm needed. Part of that is because I'm now a caregiver for my husband who has Parkinson's disease. He was diagnosed 9 years ago with Parkinson's. He's also from Urbana, and we married a little more than 2 years ago. So he had Parkinson's when I married him. It wasn't something that was a surprise. But I'm also, again, in terms of disclosure, I am the owner and head coach of Rock Steady Boxing Champaign here in town. So I'm going to be speaking from a generic benefit of it. So this isn't a promotion for my gym, anything like that. It's just, this is what I do. And so you need to know that, yes, I am the owner of the gym, but I'm going to be coming at it from more scientific and research and the benefit of it, okay? So I have a couple of people here with me. One is one of my boxers, Dave. So he'll be able to answer some questions and tell you a little bit. He'll help me demonstrate a little bit. And I inherited 3 stepdaughters when I got married. So this is Hannah. She's the middle one. She's 23. She's currently finishing up school at UIC in Chicago, so when she goes back tomorrow, she'll be starting her last semester there in kinesiology. And after that, she's always very interested in exercise and group fitness and that sort of thing. So she's not quite sure where she's going to land after that, but she wanted to come today too. So that's our crew here today. So we're going to start out in the first part, just talking about Parkinson's. How many of you would say you know quite a bit about Parkinson's? Okay, just a few of you, okay? And that's what I kind of assumed, and that's why I called it 101, because we are going to review, kind of go back to the basics about what it is, because if you haven't been part of the Parkinson's world, you might not realize some of the new terminology or some of the new approaches to it. So some of this, I'm not going to necessarily read everything, but this is from the Michael J. Fox. I have references at the bottom of each slide if I got it from someplace. But basically, we're talking about brain cells that make dopamine, okay, a chemical that coordinates our movement. They stop working or they die. If you do PET scans or DAT scans, you can see, you know, where that area is, and it shrinks like to nothing on one side, usually before the other. Okay, and so we all know that, or how many of you think you can tell if somebody has Parkinson's? If somebody walked through here in the hallway, you could say, okay, that person probably has Parkinson's. Some of us probably could, that are aware of it, because we tend to think of those outward symptoms. The biggest one is probably tremor. People think of Parkinson's, you've got a tremor, okay? Not necessarily true. My husband has no tremor, okay? Dave has no tremor. But that's the one people think about. The other is slowness of movement. They might scratch their nose and they do it this way instead of reaching up and doing it quickly. Stiffness or walking and balance problems. They might take small steps. Posture is usually curved. So it's been labeled as a movement disorder. And that's relevant up to a point. But now we know that Parkinson's affects all body systems, not just movement, okay? So constipation, depression, memory problems, and other non-movement symptoms also, it says can be, they are a part of Parkinson's. It's not just movement. So now it's considered more of a movement syndrome, or what it encompasses more than just the movement system of the body. So it's a lifelong disease. Once you're diagnosed with it, you're going to have it the rest of your life. And it's progressive, so they slowly worsen over time. We have medication, we have deep brain stimulators, we have ways to treat the symptoms, but we can't stop it yet. So it's going to progress over time. All right? Okay. So about 1 million people, you'll see different numbers, but about 1 million people in the United States and 6 million in the world. But the thing I want to point out on this slide is that each experience of living with Parkinson's is different for each person. And this might be kind of different than some other medical conditions where you'd say, okay, everybody with this particular disease looks this way or whatever. Parkinson's is not. It's very unique in that way, in that each person demonstrates and progresses and handles it differently. So if you think of the population as snowflakes, that's probably a little more accurate. In other words, they're all unique. So you can't say if you see one person, you can't say, oh, well, the next step's going to be this, or this is what you should do, or to help, or whatever. It's really very complicated disease we're now finding. Okay, so your doctor can't predict what you're going to get, when you get them, or how severe they're going to be. And yes, there's those broad paths of similarity among people with PD, but there's no guarantee you'll experience what somebody else does. So it's good to keep an open mind about things that you're seeing or experiencing, or people you're working with, because it might be a sign of Parkinson's or one of their symptoms that you might not see in somebody else. So don't discount it necessarily that it's not part of their Parkinson's. So let's go back to what we call the cardinal symptoms. In other words, these are symptoms that are unique to Parkinson's disease, and the general rule is, again, 2 of these 4 have to be present over time. So in other words, if somebody goes in with a tremor to the doctor, they're not necessarily going to say, oh, you have Parkinson's. Well, maybe. And then they'll wait, come back in a year, let's see what else is happening, and if they start having one of the other 3, now we've got 2. And now the neurologist can be a lot more certain that it probably is Parkinson's. If you remember, you remember that the Parkinson's, there's no test for it. They used to say it was only on autopsy, that you could tell somebody had Parkinson's. It's the only way. Now we have some other ways, particularly a DAT scan, can more definitely show it, but it's very expensive. It's usually used only in research. So the general population does not usually get a DAT scan. But, and some people, I've had a couple people come through the last couple of years through the gym who were told they had Parkinson's, and then 2 years later now they have something else that wasn't Parkinson's. But so that can happen, again, in that gray area where they think they're seeing Parkinson's, but it might develop in another direction that takes the doctor in another direction. Another good way the doctor sometimes will say is if they really think it's Parkinson's, what they'll do is go ahead and give them a Parkinson's medication, which is Sinemet, carbidopa, levodopa, and especially if they have tremors, if their tremor gets better with that, it's Parkinson's. Okay, so, but like my husband, he didn't have tremors, so trying the medication to make a diagnosis wouldn't have made any difference. Oh, let's go back just a second. Again, I guess I have the definition. That tremor, again, is the shakiness. It's usually, I'm sorry I didn't write down or look up, there's actually a certain hertz, there's a certain speed of tremor that is particular to Parkinson's. There can be other tremors that have a different speed that are not Parkinson's. So just because a tremor doesn't mean it's Parkinson's. Kinesia, Brady is slow, kinesia is movement. So slowness of movement, in other words, they do, like my husband a lot of times, you know, he's getting dressed and he'll pick up a shirt like this and put his hands in this way. I mean, he moves slowly to do things. Rigidity would be a stiffness, kind of like some of us might feel in the morning with arthritis or whatever, you know, you just have a hard time kind of getting full range of motion, getting full fluid movements. You're just kind of rigid, stiff. The postural instability basically is when we're talking about falls or balance problems. In other words, they go to get up out of a chair and have to stagger a little bit, or when they sit down, they kind of almost miss the chair, or they're walking along and maybe not walking in a straight line. And some of these things can get you into trouble if you get stopped. So most people now from different organizations, you have a card that you carry with you that says, I have Parkinson's disease, I'm not drunk, that sort of thing, because sometimes the slurred speech, the instability to walk in a straight line can make, if somebody's not familiar with Parkinson's at all, and they're going to say right away, let's do some sobriety tests here. So it can look that way. So again, going back probably into your memory, Dr. James Parkinson's from England first wrote about it in his essay on the shaking palsy. And that was the first time he described. And I couldn't find a paragraph or something that explained it, but I'd heard this at one point, that he would sit out in the park where he lived in England, and he would just watch people. And over time, he began to see, let's say every 10th person, or I don't know what it was, but, he'd see somebody walking a particular way, and then later he'd see another person with the same type of walk. And, as he watched people over weeks and months, and sort of he began to see a pattern of a problem. And that's how he was able to separate and recognize that there was this difference. There's something going on with these individuals. And so he wrote about it to start with. So if you want to look up anything about Dr. James Parkinson's and some of his early writings about it, that's where you would go. So these are a couple things that goes along with Parkinson's. One, so again, you might read these words, or the patient or their family, or sometimes in the notes that might come back from the neurologist's office, you might see some of these words. So dyskinesia, I would say probably means kind of like uncoordinated or not, just not controlled. Yeah, or kind of a difficulty sometimes with dyskinesia. It's uncontrolled involuntary movement that can look like fidgeting or wiggling. And if you've seen Michael J. Fox recently, he does a lot with his head and stuff, and that is called dyskinesia. The patient cannot control it. It's not controllable. It happens primarily, they believe, because of long-term use of the drugs for Parkinson's. Or if someone starts taking too much, they will develop what's called dyskinesia. And I've seen a couple of people in my gym that over time, all of a sudden they come in and they're doing something weird. And I'll say, did your medications change? Oh yeah, I'm up an extra 2 a day or something. So, oh, okay, all right. But it's always a balance between, like with Michael J. Fox, do you continue to function with these odd movements, or do you not be able to function and have less of them? So most people would probably opt to have more medication so that they can continue to walk around even if they've got funny movements. So, but like I said, it's not something they can control, so that's important to remember. Dystonia, again, muscle tone. It's a painful muscle contraction. A lot of people describe it in their toes, especially like toe curling, but it's like a cramp. They cannot control it. It's very painful. And this, I read somewhere else that it seems to be a little more prevalent in people with early onset Parkinson's. That's maybe one of their first symptoms is going to be they notice that either a hand or their arm might go into a little bit more of a, not spasm, but this posture that they can't control. So again, these two things, the patient cannot control them. So it's not that they're trying to act out or they're not trying to bring attention to themselves or anything like that. It's because of their medication. Okay. There's other things called atypical Parkinson's. Another word you might see for it is Parkinsons Plus. Now that's kind of a newer term for them. It used to be called more atypical Parkinsonisms, excuse me. And again, this comes from the Michael J. Fox website. So one is Lewy body dementia. And actually you can have Lewy body dementia without having Parkinson's. But if it's connected with Parkinson's, they can have the Parkinson's and develop this significant dementia that's actually very fast progressing. I had somebody at the gym, and I knew there was something wrong, and once I learned about Lewy bodies, it was like, and then I got the diagnosis from his wife. It's like, that's what it was. But, you know, he was very congenial, he could do everything, but there was something off about his mental capacity. I couldn't put my finger on it to start with. But it does progress very quickly. I think once they diagnosed it, he passed away within less than a year of that. Another one is called multiple system atrophy, MSA. A lot of these sound kind of similar, so I'm not going to be very good about teasing them out to other, you know, so you can tell the difference. But just in case you see the word multiple system atrophy, these people with atrophy also have more problems with the body's automatic functions. Because again, remember I said Parkinson's affects all the systems of the body. And I guess I'll throw this in right now. Some of you may have, if you keep up at all with some Parkinson's information, that now in the last 6 to 9 months, there's been a lot more interest in the gut, and that it actually starts there, not in the brain. It starts in the gut. What they found in mice models is that the abnormal cells that they find in the gut, or they put into the gut of the mice, they can actually track it with markers, and they watch it travel to the vagus nerve. And then again, if you know anatomy or physiology, the vagus nerve innervates everything internally. So they watch it progress up the vagus nerve to the brain. Okay, so these with multiple system atrophy, again, probably the clue would be the multiple system, although we know Parkinson's itself is multiple, but this one seems to have more problems with their automatic functions, you know, the problems regulating blood pressure, digestion, emotions, heart rate, body temperature, all those types of things. So they have some other things that maybe are a little more serious or a little more obnoxious to them than the typical person with Parkinson's. Another one, corticobasal degeneration. Okay. Again, this isn't very clear about it. The buildup of protein called tau is also present in Alzheimer's and in the Lewy bodies also. And the progressive supranuclear palsy, PSP, again, another disease that's linked to this buildup of this tau protein that causes the tangles in the brain. So some people might have more eye movement problems, of course, myriad cognitive changes. So there's just little differences between them. Now, in terms of what I can do at Roxy Boxy, even though it's exclusively for people with Parkinson's disease, nobody else can come except I'm with Parkinson's, but I can accept any of the Parkinsons Plus or the atypical Parkinson's. So if somebody comes with one of those, they can come to Roxy Boxing and participate in the boxing program. Okay, I put this in because I thought maybe there'd be more people, say from home health, that might be out there in the field and thinking that they're seeing Parkinson's when nobody's diagnosed it yet. So the next slide is going to be a screening, and you can, I got it online, but you can get it like to kind of quickly ask some questions of the family or the person and see what do they say to any of these questions. So like I said, this is from the Michael J. Fox Foundation. There's 12 questions. They're about posture, balance. They don't swing an arm, you know, when they're walking, shuffling, buttoning, stiffness, shaking, getting up and down from a chair, difficulty in speech, small handwriting, micrographia is another common symptom, and just general slowness of movement. So you can, if you're someone who's in a position to do some screening or kind of looking at things, you're not sure what might be going on with this person, you can either do this and then share that with the physician or the family or something, and see if someone wants to look into this a little bit more. Okay. I saw this slide at one point in something else I went to, and I just thought it was an excellent visual so I hope you'll think so also. It's the non-motor Parkinson's symptoms. So what we're looking at here, that top part of the iceberg, is the outer motor symptoms. This is the tremors, the balance problems, the things we talked about that somebody else can see. but look at all the stuff that's underneath. Okay, these are all the non-motor symptoms that can be there. And so there's a lot more underneath than what you can see up above. Pain. It's interesting because some people will start out, maybe some of the first problems might be shoulder pain, especially in a younger onset. They get shoulder pain. Well, in a 40-year-old person with shoulder pain who's active, you know, what'd you do? Well, I played baseball this summer. Okay. Or, you know, played catch with my son 5 days in a row. I don't usually do that. So they'll generally, the family doctor will send them to an orthopedist. They'll do x-rays, they'll do MRIs, and they might not see anything, but the guy's still got pain. So I even know there's people that have had shoulder surgery because of their shoulder pain, even though there's nothing that shows up on tests, but they do it, and they find out they go in there, there's nothing wrong with it, but it's the pain that the person's having. So there's no physical cause for it, but pain. So they can have pain in different places, different joints in the body that doesn't respond to, you know, the normal interventions you would do for pain. Drooling, it's not excess saliva. What's happening is that the patient, it has slower and less swallowing mechanisms, so the fluids accumulate in the mouth. So it's not excess, it's the normal amount, they just aren't swallowing it, so it's coming out as drooling. There's a medication, my husband's on one that actually helps that they have less fluid. But we don't like to do a lot of that because one thing, it can drop blood pressure and also can dehydrate, you know, you have to keep on top of that. They also can do some of the things, they can do Botox into the salivary glands to help with that. So there's some approaches for drooling. Loss of smell, this is a long-term. How long do you think you had Parkinson's before you were diagnosed?
A few years.
A few? How many is a few?
3.
3 years? Okay. A lot of people can be like 10 years post or pre-diagnosis, and they'll look back and they'll say, oh yeah, I haven't been able to smell much for 8 years. But they just think it's maybe aging, or they think it's something else, but oh, I just don't smell as well as I used to, or my wife doesn't cook the way she used to, or whatever. The loss of smell is a critical one to perk your ears up. If you hear somebody, if they don't have Parkinson's, but they're talking about a loss of smell for several years. Swallowing problems, again, because of the slowness of movement of the swallow. The swallow is slower. They can get aspiration or other swallowing problems. So a lot of times when someone's first diagnosed, we want them to have a speech therapy evaluation, a swallow eval, occupational and physical therapy assessments to see what else might be going on. Constipation is another big one. I would say loss of smell and constipation are probably the 2 biggest things that I hear from my people that they had before they were diagnosed. So again, you go into your doctor and say, gosh, for the last month or 2, I've just had a terrible problem with constipation. The doctor will say, well, try this, this, and this. You know, but that's why it's good to have the medical record, because after 4 years, you're still complaining of constipation, and it's not helping. It might not be a general GI problem. It's something to tuck away, okay, that you've got constipation. Vision changes, I know basically probably most of the vision changes have to do with double vision. Seems to be the most common complaint about vision. Again, depression and anxiety. Originally or early on, people thought that the depression and anxiety came with the diagnosis of Parkinson's. You've just been told that you have a degenerative disease and there's no cure for it. You know, who wouldn't go through a period of depression or anxiety about what that's going to mean for the rest of your life? So they thought it kind of went with the diagnosis. But if you think about it, with the loss of dopamine is a mood elevator. And so if your body's not producing, your brain's not producing as much dopamine any longer, that's going to lower your mood, okay? So it's not necessarily a reaction to the diagnosis, but at part of the diagnosis. And while I'm on that topic, I don't think I have it anywhere else. By the time someone's diagnosed, they have lost, there's different numbers. I'm going to say like 85 to 90% of the amount of dopamine in their system. And that's before you even get symptoms. So by the time someone is diagnosed, they're operating on 10 to 15 to 20% of the normal level of dopamine. So again, depression, anxiety can be a precursor to the diagnosis. And again, what happens if you go to the doctor and just say, I'm just feeling sad and depressed, and what are they going to do? Well, counseling maybe, serotonin, some kind of medication to help with that, which may help because it helps to raise those levels in the body. But again, it should be something to be tucked away, and we start getting this cluster of loss of smell and double vision and constipation and depression, but you don't see anything on the outside. You don't see any movement problems, but you got a whole cluster of things. Skin changes, it can be oily, extra oily skin. There was at one time, there was a feeling that people with Parkinson's were more likely to develop melanoma. It's still kind of out there. I don't think it's really as a set connection as it maybe it used to be, but you'll still read it sometimes. They're more prone to perhaps getting melanomas. Sleep disorders is another big one. So who wouldn't go to the doctor and say, I'm just not sleeping well? I can get to sleep, but then I wake up at 1 or 2 in the morning, I can't get back to sleep. And again, he's going to send you for a sleep study, or he's going to talk to you about what's going on in your life. Are you stressed? Whatever. So, but sleep disorders, again, very, very common with people with Parkinson's. Sexual dysfunction, in other words, just not having the ability to have a satisfying sexual relationship, and they used to, but now having some problems. The low blood pressure, again, sometimes it's medication, or it could be just from the Parkinson's itself. There's a new term now, the NOH. I wasn't familiar with this until a few years ago. Neurogenic orthostatic hypertension. So the neurogenic means it's coming from a neurological source, as opposed to like cardiovascular source, where the arteries and veins are not as plastic, and so they're not changing like they're supposed to. This is the nerves that innervate that now are not causing that change in diameter to keep the blood pressure stable. Again, more sleepiness and fatigue, especially those. And again, all these key things you can say to the doctor, and they're going to attribute it first to other things. So it can take a while for this to all come together and say it's part of Parkinson's. Okay. I want to touch on, I mentioned earlier about young onset Parkinson's, and again, it might be that you're not going to be seeing too many of these people, or it could have been that this person was a young onset. They might be 70 now, but they were diagnosed when they were under age 50, and different, this is again, it's from Michael J. Fox. I went to a neurologist's office a week or so ago, and they said, well, we have a neurologist that doesn't call them young onset unless they're under 30. Like, well, okay, but that's not really the typical description of it. But generally, they're about 10 to 20% of the population with PD have what we call young onset. The average age for diagnosis for people with Parkinson's is 65. Of course, there's people that are older and people younger. That's an average age. So those that are diagnosed under the age of 50, they may take longer to actually diagnose what they have, because it's generally slower progressing, and so they could take more like 15 years for it to be diagnosed rather than 7 or 8 years. Okay, and again, it could be because they're not expecting. In fact, I had somebody tell me that their doctor said that, in fact, she's a nurse that I've worked with, and she's now in her mid-50s or something, and she was diagnosed finally at like 47. But I think earlier in her 40s, her neurologist now said, well, you can't have Parkinson's because you're too young. I don't know what school they went to, but that's not true at all. But anyway, so different people have different ideas, but then they went to a movement disorder specialist, which is generally what we want people with Parkinson's to go to. It's a specialized neurologist that has gone a special route in neurology to work with Parkinson's, MS, Huntington's disease, those sorts of movement disorders. Okay? So again, for younger people, we're not really expecting to see Parkinson's, so a lot of times the diagnosis can be missed or, again, delayed out there. And again, here is where we're talking about, it's not uncommon for arm or shoulder stiffness or pain to be attributed to arthritis or sports injuries instead of possibly Parkinson's. So, especially if they go and have tests and everything's clear. Yeah, you know, that could be one of those pieces to keep in mind for later on. People with young onset, I think I mentioned this, that there seems to be more likely to experience that dystonia. And again, one of my guys who's younger onset in the gym, that's what he said. He's got like curling of toes or cramping more of the lower extremities. But as the younger they are, the more likely they are to develop that dyskinesia, which was the fidgeting, the movement that they can't control. And you think about it, long-term use of levodopa and a long-term of Parkinson's. So again, Michael J. Fox is a pretty good example of that because he was diagnosed, I may be wrong, I'm going to say 32, 34, something like in his early 30s. And so he's been dealing with this for a long time, and he definitely has the dyskinesias. Everybody always wants to know what causes Parkinson's. You know, can I get it? My dad had Parkinson's. Am I going to get it? We're still not quite sure, but what they're saying is more genetic changes rather than a direct genetic link. In other words, we're seeing that there are some mutations on some of the genes that now are there. They know which ones they are. But the thing is, the person may have that mutation if they do genetic counseling, but they might not develop Parkinson's. So it's still, yeah, the mutation was there, but it's not going to develop. But other things might cause it. The environmental factors typically are exposure, regular exposure to chemicals, insecticides. I have a friend whose father had Parkinson's. He was a long time groundskeeper for a golf course. And farmers, if they don't use the right respiratory protection, might get it that way. Others are steel workers. I do have a guy who was a welder for 30-some years here in the area, and he has Parkinson's, so did it contribute? Maybe. So there are some things like that that seem to contribute to it. So if you have the mutation in your genes, some of the environmental things might then trigger it. Okay, but whether it actually causes it, there's something that you could say was a marker to say, okay, if you have this, you're going to develop Parkinson's. We're not there yet.
What about environmental issues like head injuries?
It's not as clear cut with injuries like that, but definitely repeated head trauma. They find there's been some incidents of that. People who have a lot of head injuries from football, boxing, Muhammad Ali, they don't use head equipment, brain, skull protection. He got hit in the head, I'm sure, many, many times over the course of his. But did he have a predisposition in his genes also? I don't know.
Possibly.
So yeah, again, there's no direct connection, but anytime you have head injuries and damage to the brain, you never know what's going to happen from that. And just like he did, please feel free to ask a question anytime. It's fine. So again, I put this in again because I felt like maybe I was going to have some home health people or some people working that could run into young onset. So I want to be sure and just clarify, why would it make a difference if someone was young onset or somebody just has Parkinson's? What's the difference? Why do we want to make that distinction between the two? One of the things is, in fact, what I'm starting here in Champaign next month is a gathering. It's called The Gathering, and it's it's a support group, but we're not calling it a support group particularly. But it's for people with young onset, people who are diagnosed under 50, because we have a support group here in Champaign County, but it meets during the day. Most exercise group classes are during the day. They're working. They can't come. And so I feel like they're kind of out there alone or hidden in the community because they're dealing with this life-altering diagnosis, but they might only see their doctor once a year, and then that's like, well, how are you doing? Not really to get into any issues, and so they're just kind of navigating this alone or with their spouse, or their spouse may not even be willing to talk about it yet with them or whatever that, and then they have kids. Again, the youngest one I have right now has an 8-year-old and a 10-year-old, and he hasn't really talked to him about it. He was just diagnosed in May, but he said his oldest one knows, he thinks, because his youngest one is very good on the computer. So he thinks he's probably figured it out, but he hasn't actually sat down and talk with them about it. And again, employment, they are working full-time, so what do they do about that? Can they continue to work as long as they want to or need to? You know, when do they approach their employer and tell them they have an incurable disease? You know, there's supposed to be protection for that, but, you know, people are still worried that if they let that be known, how is that gonna affect their employment? There can be, I mean, their employer should be able to adjust. Like my young guy, he's being allowed to come to the gym twice a week, his boss lets him come. An earlier young onset I had, he had to go in at 6 in the morning to do work, to then be gone for 2 hours to get to the gym, have class, and get back to work. So he still had to put in his 40 hours, which meant he had to go into work early to do it. The current guy does not have to do that. He can just take off. So, but most employers, hopefully, they would be willing to adapt to that, but that's an area where they don't even want to go there. They don't even want to begin that conversation, because once that conversation started with the boss or with HR, then they feel like everybody knows and they don't want to do it. They don't want to talk about it. Finances, again, they're looking at what's going to happen. Am I going to need long-term care insurance? Am I going to be able to take care of my family? Am I going to be able to work? What kind of finances are we going to have 20 years from now? And again, family planning, this talks about more on females in family planning, that there's limited data on the effect of pregnancy and in someone with Parkinson's, but there's no reason that they can't have a healthy pregnancy and healthy babies. However, some of the interactions with Parkinson's drugs and birth control pills might make that a little tricky. But again, the family planning, should we have children? Is it genetic? Do I want to have a child with the fact that, you know, they might develop it later on? You know, all those, you know, you kind of question all that with you have breast cancer or all kinds of other health issues. People question whether they should have a family. But again, this is the age of people when they're thinking about that. The other thing I want to talk about, and I guess because I'm here, that I want you to, I know the people that are in your communities have families, and these families maybe were the caregivers, you know, in the past before they come into your facility, but some of them might still be very involved in their relatives' care, even though they're in your facility. They're going to be in every day, and you know, they still want to spend 8 hours, you know, with them, even though you're there for them, but they're still there. But I want you to be aware of some of the things going on with caregivers, just to keep an eye on them also, not just the person with Parkinson's, but the loved ones and people that have been maybe doing the care up until this point. So there's a lot of information. Again, I'm not going to read everything. It's in the handout that you can download. Okay. So if you're a caregiver and family, again, this is from their point of view that we do great work without receiving any reimbursement, support, help, or assistance. We go it alone. 49% in 2017 said they received no help from other family members. 74% say they do not have a backup or a trained backup to provide care in their absence if they're sick or had an emergency or just want to take a break. You know, they have, so almost 3/4 do not have that resource. And that we all feel it, okay? Talking about the stress survey, over 1,000 caregivers surveyed about where were their stress levels from 1 to 5, and the current number at that time when they did it was 4.14. And over 80% of the respondents said it was 4 or 5. So they're under a tremendous amount of stress. And it's constant. They have between 2 and 8 hours of time for themselves each week, not per day, per week. And then that's less than 1 hour a day that we have it for ourselves. And 1 hour at a time is not enough to recharge your batteries. So again, a lot of stress that way. Okay, some of them want help but can't find it, or there isn't any resources in the communities. We put our own wellness on hold. Again, a lot of times, 60% of the caregivers say they do not have time to take care of their own physical, emotional, dental, medical needs. They'll cancel appointments or not make them because They can't go. They can't get anybody to stay with their loved one, or they can't leave their loved one, for the 2 hours it might need to go to the doctor and back. So they just say, it's okay, I don't need to go, and they don't take care of themselves. Okay? And it costs businesses, again, because of the caregivers that are out there in the work field. They're having to take care of a family member. So now businesses are having to replace employees because they quit or retire early to take care of somebody, or because of, people have to take off a couple hours to take mom or dad or spouse to the doctor. So there's all these work interruptions, and so they come in late, they leave early, take time off. They have to. I mean, it's not because they want to, and because, oh good, I get 2 hours off work. They're stressed to have to do this, but they have to do it. So businesses are not, they're also seeing the effect not just on the personal people, but on business in general. So again, if you're dealing with some caregivers and you begin to see some of these signs, it's something to, again, kind of tuck away and maybe have a conversation privately with them about how they're doing, how things going. So the usual things you would think about: burnout, lack of energy, overwhelming fatigue, sleep problems, changes in eating habits, weight loss and gain, kind of the same things you would see with depression, feeling hopelessness, withdrawing from or losing interest in activities. That, again, a lot of this sounds like depression, right? Okay, neglecting their own physical needs, feeling like caregiving for this person is all you do. That's who you are. You have nothing else in your life except taking care of that person. Unusually impatient, irritable, argumentative, okay? Primarily with that person. So a lot of times you'll see somebody in, the wife is getting really mad at the husband because he won't do this or can't do this or whatever, and you're seeing this anger in the spouse. And anxiety about the future. Depression, of course, the mood swings, difficulty coping. It's just everyday stuff. Something small will happen, but it's a huge trigger for coping mechanisms. Again, other physical problems that we would see with these types of things: headaches, stomach aches. Lowered resistance to illness, unfortunately, because then they're going to get sick and they can't take care of the person they want to take care of. So it becomes a cycle. But just listening or watching the caregivers and see if you see. Now, one time incident, not necessarily, but every time when the people come in, or almost every other time or something, when they come in, there's some kind of arguing going on, or slapping, or whatever, just all, the signs of something like that. So again, you can counsel, or, if you're in homes and you have other caregivers, why not, a caregiver support group out there. Like, we have a support group for Parkinson's, but we don't have a separate caregiver support group just for them. Once a month, we kind of focus on having the caregivers there, but we still don't necessarily talk about caregiving issues. But some tips to letting them know they need to ask for help. They need to ask for other people to step up and help. And I know there's a great caregiver conference in November for the National Caregiving Association. Their headquarters are in Chicago. And I believe this is the 4th year that they're having this in November. It's a wonderful program. What I heard last year was writing out on a index card the things that if somebody says, "What can I do for you?" that you would have some things written down. Like, can you take Dad to the barber next Thursday? Or can you take Bob to the barber? Or could you pick up, once a week when you go shopping, would you get me a gallon of milk? Or something. Something you tend to maybe run out of and have to go to the store before you really wanted to. But having regular things, and if someone says, "Well, let me know if there's anything I can do to help," well, you have something right there to tell you. You don't have to think of something. Because usually people will help if they know specifically what they could do. If they're offering, they just don't know what to offer. And if you just say, okay, and you never call them, then they think you don't need help. And they do desperately need help. Again, involving friends, create a list of things that need to be done and point to the list. Taking regular breaks, even 15 or 20 minutes a day, making sure they do something for themselves. Someone that I'm working with right now is talking about having some, she's even wanting me to do just 10 minutes, in a comfortable place. So for me, it might be on my back porch, in the evening when the birds are out or the crickets are out, and just kind of emptying my mind and just being there. So taking regular breaks and doing it purposefully, exercising, that's really important. I know a lot of caregivers that still during the day, they still get out and do a walk at least once a day. That's important, but there's other things, yoga. But being with somebody else to do it, taking a walk with a neighbor or a friend is good. Eating healthy, again, you tend to maybe rely on more fast food or easy packaged foods because you got so much else to do. But eating healthy, is really important for the person with Parkinson's and for the caregiver. Again, attending a support group, and if there isn't one, ask for one. Try to see if someone will get something started because it's really important. And again, seeking professional help. I'm going to a counselor right now because of issues that I'm having because I was single for 40 years. I was married for a very short time and then single for 40 years before I got married. So I'm dealing with being married at 60 years old again, and then I'm also a caregiver. And so, there's some issues that I need to deal with and to make our life better than it has been. Oh, okay. So again, I just put in some things about caregiving resources. They're all over the place. So this is from the APDA, Parkinson's, which is the American Parkinson's Disease Association. This is a link to their resources and support. So there are resources out there for caregivers. So, and again, more Illinois Department of Aging, National Alliance, AARP, the caregiving. This is the one I was talking about, caregiving.com, about the conference. So, okay. So, questions? Yes.
I have a friend whose son came down with early onset and has had a very good life, normal life. But he's had an operation, and he's very much improved, very much.
What did he have the deep brain stimulator put in? The deep brain stimulator?
Something like that. I'm not really sure
Okay.
about the details. I
Yes.
think something like that.
Yes.
And he's doing very well. But I was wondering, is early onset an advantage in any way, or is it more? And is there, does it shorten the lifespan?
People with Parkinson's die with Parkinson's, not from Parkinson's. So your lifespan is going to be whatever it's going to be normally, unless till you get to the end, toward the end of life. If you have poor care, you can always get pneumonias, you can get infections, you can get bed sores, those sort of things that, of course, shorten your life that you wouldn't have had if you maybe weren't less mobile. But generally, it doesn't shorten your lifespan.
And early onset, if you diagnosed young, doesn't have any advantage, except for I remember them saying that he heard there was an operation, and the fact that he got it so young that he should wait, and the research is so good that eventually there would be hope for him to have an operation, which is what he did.
Yes, the deep brain stimulators now are very sophisticated. They're they're not near the ordeal that they used to be. And now the only thing it's going to change, it's the same as the medication, it's only going to help with tremors. So if your primary symptom is not tremors, then that's not going to help you for the other symptoms. But you have to go through a very rigid screening process with the neurologist and the whole team to see whether you're a candidate for that, and sometimes people are not for various reasons. But yeah, but it's been very helpful. I can't remember if Michael J. Fox had a deep brain stimulator or not. I don't think so. I don't think so either. But there are a lot of people who have. Yeah, and it does help, but eventually, those have to be turned up. And it's just like the medication, it's still not going to make you have a full life to 85 and do what you did when you were 30. It's still not going to be that way, but yeah.
About the Lewy bodies that you mentioned, I recently started working for the first time at a dementia care facility. And so I bought a book just to try and learn a little bit more about the various types of dementias, and it mentioned that Lewy bodies and Parkinson's disease they progress towards each other, so that individuals with Parkinson's disease ultimately can develop Lewy bodies, which can cause dementia issues.
Right.
But that individuals can develop Lewy bodies without Parkinson's disease, and then that eventually can become Parkinson's disease later on, and I didn't know.
I don't know, I've heard it go that way. I may be wrong, I'm sorry, I'm not, that's not an expertise area.
I just read the book. I don't know anything.
Well, like I said, it could be because I'm not versed fully, in those sorts of things, but definitely, the problem is if someone has Parkinson's and they develop Lewy bodies, it just complicates.
I just think the point is that it was like the Parkinson's disease can develop into memory issues.
Yes.
And that's something to keep in mind when thinking of the plan for quality of life
Right.
and planning going forward.
Yes, yes. So in that case, you still have to look at the issues that you do with anybody with memory issues. Can they be home alone? Can they pay their bills? Can they still get groceries? Can they use the stove safely? Can they get around safely in their home? So it's the same things, but now with Parkinson's, they might have other issues of mobility related to Parkinson's too. So you're right. Some people, I've got some people with Parkinson's that have had it 20 years or whatever, and they're sharp as a tack, but I usually find, I do a MoCA. I don't know if you're familiar with the MoCA test. It's a quick brain function, cognitive function test. I do that with all my boxers that join now because I kind of want to know where they're starting from. And I've been surprised because like my 41-year-old that I thought, he'll get 30 out of 30, because he's working full time, he's smart, he's active. And I was surprised where I saw problems in the MoCA. It wasn't severe. It didn't even get down to the mild cognitive level, which is only 4 points, down to 26. It wasn't that low, but he was still off a little bit, and that surprised me. So usually there can be some things still going on that they can hide or they can compensate for a long time.
And you said every case develops differently. So
And that's the point,
what you
yes.
have to keep in mind.
Yes, is that they develop differently, and you just have to go with the flow and go, okay, this is new. This is something new with the Parkinson's that we weren't expecting. What time is it, Dave?
What do you have? I'm sorry.
What time is it, anybody? What?
20 minutes before.
20 minutes till 4?
Almost.
Okay, good, okay,
Yeah,
this
sorry.
is good, okay. Well, we had the Q&A. Any other questions so far about just the Parkinson's, the information, or the resources? Yeah.
I'm looking for a facility that can care for someone with Parkinson's. I've been working with a resident in a skilled nursing facility. She's in her early 40s. She doesn't really need skilled care, but she's not appropriate for assisted living either. She has some other illnesses that do occasionally require care. She's fairly independent. She spends a lot of time on her computer and things, but she wants to be in a place that has other people like her that are younger and are dealing with Parkinson's. Do you know any facilities like that in Illinois?
I don't. Doesn't mean they're not out there. I would start with like the Department of Aging or the AARP, some of those, and specifically ask those questions. I don't know that there's any kind of data or registry, that would lump those
Yeah,
type of facilities.
I've tried looking for, facilities that are, specific to Parkinson's disease. And
Yeah, you probably won't find that. I've never run across a facility that most of their residents have Parkinson's. I've never run across one like that.
okay, I just thought you might.
Be a good
have
idea,
information
wouldn't
I
it?
do not.
What about group homes?
Pardon me?
Group homes, what about some group homes?
Yeah, I don't know that would work because she does have some other health issues. I don't think they're serious enough that she needs to be in a skilled facility, but like I said, she's not probably appropriate for an assisted living type situation either. She does occasionally need more.
Well, they have nursing staff, in the assisted living, so.
Yeah, like Eden supportive living here in town is for younger
Is
people.
it?
Mhm.
Well, the Eden community, I think you have to be under 50 to be at Eden, which is downtown.
Yeah,
Champaign.
so she's
40,
40.
early 40s.
Yeah.
She might qualify, but I don't know what kind of physical conditions you need to have to get in there.
Yeah.
But, yeah,
And do you know if is there a website?
I'm sure there probably is.
It's EDEN,
Yeah,
supportive
just
living here
Eden,
in
like
town.
the garden.
Okay.
And they accept Medicaid too, so.
Okay.
So, thank you.
We're going to move on to the boxing portion and exercise. Anybody else have any questions here about just Parkinson's in general? I hope I hit some things that maybe you heard at one time and had forgotten, or maybe there's some new information. Because Parkinson's is a complicated disease. It's really different than most other diseases that you might deal with. So it really takes people, somebody on staff, I just feel from that perspective that somebody needs to become a specialist in Parkinson's in every building, just so that when you have these residents, I mean, you know, how many of you have residents in your care that are Parkinson's? You have some? You know, like how many do you have? Do you know?
I've got a couple.
Couple? Yeah, it could be anywhere, you know, up to maybe 6 or 7. I had one facility had like 7 people with that diagnosis, but I only met one of them, so I don't know the different levels. So it's good for the staff, again, because of all the non-motor symptoms, the drug interactions. There's just a whole host of things, like I'm also an ambassador in care for the Parkinsons Foundation, and we have what's called an Aware and Care Kit, which is like a toiletry bag kit that they're supposed to take to the hospital with them. Has information for the nurses and the doctors and everybody that cares for them about the uniqueness of Parkinson's, like they need their medication on time. That's critical. It's like you wouldn't tell a diabetic, well, I know you need your medication at 10, but I can't get to you till 11:30, so you just hold there, you just wait to get your diabetic medicine. You know, it's important that they have it on time. There are interactions with other drugs, and in fact, things that might be normal to give somebody for nausea or pain should not be given to somebody with Parkinson's because of the interaction. So it's important to, like I said, have somebody that's got a little extra knowledge and training in Parkinson's to be able to care well for those people. Okay, what I want to do here, artist experience. All right, stand up. You've been sitting for a while, so stand up. Oh, and kind of get some space. Some of you maybe come out to the middle, so you've got some space. Dave, why don't you come up here? Dave is one of my boxers. Okay. So, Dave, why don't you just briefly tell them a little bit about yourself, who you are and what you do. And
I'm like the deer with the headlights now. So I didn't know there were so many people here. I'm retired from the University of Illinois. I was a computer programmer, and I was first diagnosed only about 4 or 5 months ago with Parkinson's, but I had a friend who was a doctor who a year earlier said, I think you have Parkinson's. And then I went to another doctor, and she said, I don't think you have Parkinson's. And then I went to a neurologist, and they said, you have Parkinson's. But it's pretty hard to tell early on sometimes because your symptoms are not all there. And so I started taking medication right away when 4 months ago when I was told that I had Parkinson's. And I also started going to Rock City Boxing. I'm going now 4 times a week to Rock City Boxing. So that's why I'm a boxer. When you're at Rock City Boxing, you don't actually box against anyone else. You're just like a boxer in training, but you would never box against anyone else. So you don't have to worry about someone hitting you or something like that. Anything more you want me to say?
do you have any questions for Dave? This is Dave.
Dave.
Hey, Dave.
How did you hear about the boxing program?
Well, actually, my brother-in-law, who lives near Indianapolis, had Parkinson's diagnosed several years ago, and he went to it in Indianapolis, which is where it started, actually. And now Lora tells me that there's hundreds of locations worldwide now for Rock City Boxing. So
That's how most of my people find it, either through somebody in the family that knows about it, or a lot of neurologists. So a lot of my people, they go to Chicago, or they go to Barnes or Indianapolis for their movement disorder specialist or the neurologist, and they know about Rock City Boxing, and so they will tell people to come back to Champaign and find out we have one here, and then they can join. So we're getting referrals from not just here in Champaign.
I did get a referral from my neurologist at Carl. I got a big load of stuff, including a mention of the Rock City Boxing, so that was another place where I found out about it.
So what I want to do, right hand, you can go and put that on, Dave. We're going to do a little demonstration, and I'm going to have you do some. Not against anybody else, but just
Okay.
just to practice the moves. And we're going to talk about this more in the next presentation, so I don't want to say too much right now. But this is a bad shape, isn't it? Bad glove. Okay, so what we're doing in boxing is doing, again, it'll be on a slide, high intensity, high velocity, forced exercise. Those three components seem to make a difference in Parkinson's symptoms. What we've seen in research is that those types of exercises put together slow down the progression. What they found, they're actually able to say that they feel like it's neuroprotective, not neuroregenerative yet. They see it in mice, but they aren't ready to say it's regenerative in humans yet, but protective for sure. In other words, we might be able to keep him at this level for a long, long time because we're protecting of him losing more cells, okay? But it's this type of exercise that does it. So some people will say, well, any type of exercise is good, isn't it? Well, I always come back like, is it? If you're just wanting general fitness, then any type might be good. I mean, anything that keeps you active and moving and the blood circulating, yes. But if we're trying to work on balance and stiffness and some of those other things that come particularly with Parkinson's, not necessarily. You know, I have a couple people say, oh, I golf, you know, isn't that good for me? It's like, well, yeah, if you're looking at maybe range of motion, it's not bad. But what's it doing for your balance? I mean, you're still on 2 feet. What's it doing for your cardiovascular? You're not walking, you're using a cart. So it depends on what your focus is and what your goal is, okay? So when we do boxing, again, I teach this to people when they first come and get assessed. There's a boxing stance. And you might not be able to really see us, but I'll describe it. Your left foot is forward, and the right foot is back. And it doesn't matter which hand, no matter if you're right hand or left hand. This is the boxing stance. And this would give you what? Why would we stand this way? So balance. Yeah, it gives you a bigger base of support, the ability to move back and forth, so you don't have to be rigid and not move, because you can move through it, but yet keep your balance. Okay? And again, doing that weight shifting, so you get that somatic input through the feet, up through the body, through all the joints as to what's happening. Okay, so it can change. So our feet are in this position, our hands are up here. So they're always up by your jaw, because in real boxing, when I come out like that, I got to come back, because when I'm out like this, he might come in with a hook here. So you want to go out, but you want to come right back. So this is where you want to be, because if you drop down here, now it takes time to get your hand up there, and sometimes that half a second makes a difference. So it should be right up here all the time, okay? These are called focus mitts, or target mitts, you'll hear them called some. So what he's going to do is just a cross, okay? So he's going to reach out and hit right in the middle of that and then back, okay? Do it fast. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Excellent. Okay. Dave is a little bit unique in that he has a shoulder injury on the left. He had a nerve injury from a fractured clavicle, so he doesn't have much use of that left shoulder. And so he's a little more limited in what he can do in the gym, and that's fine. That's what I'm there for, is to adjust. Okay, now, so that was a cross, which means the hand comes from this position across the body to hit on the other side. Crosses over. So again, what are we getting when we do this? What's happening in the body when we do this? Rotation, weight shifting, going from my right foot to my front foot, rotation. Good. And so if you use your body to help with that, the power doesn't all have to come from the hand. It's coming from the whole body. You get a lot more effective hit than when you're doing it that way. So that was a cross. Now he's going to do a jab. A jab is the same thing, except it's straight out from the shoulder. Okay, so jab, 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 jab. Good. Excellent. Okay, very good. Sorry, I have to think which hand to use. You normally have both of them on. Okay, there are 4 hits. We just did 2. Hook, now, hands up like this. Okay, hook is just what it sounds like. So you're going to bring your arm back here. This is the starting position. So your arm is back, Your elbows up, your hands rotated so you can see the fingers. Okay, and you're going to come, again, you're going to step forward and punch. But your arm stays up, it's a hook. Again, think of it as a hook. A hook, so it's kind of round, round, round. It's a hook. Again, what are we getting here? What are you feeling in your body as we do this? Again, weight shifting, but you get that arm away from your body, okay? Changing your center of gravity all the time, okay? So now keep your left hand up to your chin, that's it. Okay, go. 1. Now this one, wait, keep your thumb straight up, yeah. 1, 2, that's it, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. Very good. Come over here for the next one. Last one is an uppercut. So an uppercut now, same stance, everything's the same. With my right hand uppercut, it's going to be up here. Now, again, your hand's going to face your face, and you're going to bring it down like this, keep the elbow bent, back behind your hip, and come down. It's going to leave a mark. Yeah. Okay, so you shift back on your back foot, and you're going to come up. Think about coming right up under somebody's chin, or into the gut, maybe. So it's a round movement, so the arm's not straight, it's bent a little bit, and come right up by the hip. So the hand stays in the same position. Okay, uppercut. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Excellent. Okay, now, we're all going to stand here, we're going to do all 4 of them together. Okay? All right? So again, you're going to start, I'm going to do this so you won't be confused about the mirror, okay? So, jab is number 1, and that's always the first one. So sometimes coaches will call it a 1. They won't say jab, they'll say 1, and that's what you do, okay? So we're going to do jab, back on your foot, cross, back on your foot, hook, back on your foot, and uppercut. Okay? Ready? Go. Jab, back, cross, back, hook, back, uppercut. Good, again. Jab, back, cross, back, hook, back, uppercut. Jab, cross, hook, uppercut. Jab, cross, hook, uppercut. Jab, cross, hook, uppercut. Jab, cross, hook, uppercut. Now walk and do it. Jab, cross, hook, uppercut. Jab, uppercut. Okay, so those are the basic hits. Okay, and like you said, we don't hit each other. They'll hit my focus mitts. We have speed bags. Again, the speed bag position, this bag should be a little bit up into the, like between the nose and the chin, the bulb part, because we want them reaching up. Again, this is to combat that posture that they'll often get. We want to work on anything that works on back extension. So with this one, he's going to stand there and get his hands up here. And if you look through my hand this way, my elbow and upper arm are moving. It's just my forearm in a circle. So I'm doing this. Or 1, 2, 3. So the sound will be 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. So they're standing, and so they're focused on a task. They don't realize they're using all these upper back muscles. And so I take pictures of my people every 6 months to look at changes in posture, because we want to see a change in posture, not because they think about it, but because their body is realigning themselves. So then I'm trying to think if we could do something else besides just boxing to demonstrate.
Did you ever try marching?
I'm sorry?
I heard marching helps. Try
Well,
to-
yes, I mean, as part of our warm-ups. So do this with me, march. So get those knees up. Get those knees up, up, and go whatever speed you want to, but get those knees up. Get the arms pumping. Again, because usually one arm that doesn't work as well as the other, so we try to get them symmetrical. That's it. Okay, now, touch your knee. Touch your knee. Touch your knee. Touch your knee. 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 Good. And we do other things. We do squats. So, well, we'll get into more of that. But these are some of the exercises we do. So you can see why, again, large amplitude, a lot of distance, large or high frequency, boom, 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 quickly, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, forced. Come on, Dave, come on, do 2 more, come on, faster, 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 that's the forced part. I say that a lot.
That's important, that's important.
What's the favorite thing you do at the gym?
The favorite thing?
Uh-huh.
I like to get my heart rate up, so I do the cardio ones, but I don't know, the speed bag maybe, I don't know, that's good.
Okay.
How long does the class usually last?
90 minutes, generally. I do a class in Danville. Also, my 2 guys are, they both want an hour.
What's
And
the
so-
speed bag?
Pardon?
I'm sorry, back on what his answer, he said the speed bag?
Speed bag are the bags that look like teardrops that hang up here, and you hit them and they hit the platform. They're a platform, and so you make the bag hit different places.
So is that something that people could have at home?
Yes,
Yes.
yes. They can have a heavy bag at home too.
How fast can you get it going?
I don't know if there's any way to measure it, but none of my people we're not boxer ready yet. But again, it's our hand coordination, knowing when to hit, because there's a sweet spot that you have to hit, or else it doesn't do what you want it to do. So it's getting that in there at a certain time, not when you feel like hitting it, but because it's, again, force, because it's making you hit when you need to, not when you want to. And there's other ways. I mean, you can hit from the back instead of from the front of the bag. That's a whole different. You can hit side. You can do like infinity hits. So people can progress in their talent. I have a fellow coach. He also has Parkinson's in Peoria, and he's excellent on the speed bag. He probably has a lot of YouTube videos and stuff, but he's just phenomenal on the speed bag. So.
That's what you mean by force, then you just mean some other outside is causing the body to respond.
Right. It can be a rhythm, like it can be music. Like sometimes I'll say when we use upbeat, loud, fast music most of the time. And so what that's doing, I'll say do it to the rhythm. So they might be doing something, this speed, but if the rhythm is this, then it'll make them speed up if they're doing it with the music. Or, this. Movements or whatever. It's any outside force that kind of gets you going faster than you would do comfortably. Yeah.
You said 90 minutes. Do you have to sustain movement for 90 minutes?
No.
Or for any particular amount of time, do you have to sustain it?
We do 10 minutes of warm-up where they can do whatever they want. Then we do 20 minutes of group warm-up to get the heart rate up and get moving. Yeah, and then we do different things on the bags, different what's called interval. So we do 6 minutes at different stations, and that's for about 45 to 50 minutes, and then we do about a 10-minute cool down. So the whole class is 90 minutes. The very active part is about 45 to 50 minutes. But people do what they can, I mean, I'm there to encourage. It's that fine line between forced movement and forcing somebody to do something. So people know their bodies, and I say, if you can't, okay, just do the best you
But I'm
can.
getting at I'm trying to understand it, that the sustained movement is what the value is, isn't
Right.
it?
Mhm.
Well,
the
doing
speed-
other things.
The speed of the movement, and how hard you're doing it. You can't just go out here and do this
So it's
and expect to get.
intensity over time is
Yeah.
where you get the best result.
Yeah, you're not going to get much result probably do intensity for 5 seconds.
Right.
I mean,
Or just doing something lightly for a long time.
Right,
High
right. Because it works on
intensity.
different parts of exercise physiology come into play. And we also do balance things. We're on a Bosu ball, which is like a half a ball that you stand on balancing, do different things. We have a rebounder, we have rowing machines, we sit on balls, we have all the different kind of bags. I have an elliptical, stationary bikes. We do strengthening stuff. We do planks sometimes in our warm-ups first thing in the morning. I try to mix it up. I don't want people to come into class and go, oh, we're going to do this again, or we're going to do this first. I know what we're doing next. Sometimes they might anyway, but I do try to mix up the routines. And also now I have 2 different level classes. I used to have everybody together, and then I just modify each individual person if they needed it. Typically what most rock studies do is that they will divide people by ability. That way the whole class is modified rather than just trying to keep up with individual people's needs. So since I moved into a new gym in July, I've done that. So I have 2 levels of higher level people and 2 levels of people that need a little bit more help. So that I modify the whole class. So what I do in Dave's class is going to be different than I'm going to do in the other class. We might be working on the same thing, but we're going to do it differently for safety reasons and whatever they need.
Do you have people that have walkers and canes and such?
I do. I don't have a lot, but I've had them, and some gyms will have a lot. In fact, there's a lot of people, I know in Indy there's always people that will say, well, I have, this person came in with a walker, and after coming for a month, they forgot their walker when they left, and things like that, or now they're not using a walker anymore. Or they used to come in a wheelchair, and now they don't use a wheelchair anymore. So what we're trying to do in Rock City is get the best quality of life for the longest time we can. In the past, without this type of exercise, maybe you had the last 5 or 6 years of your life were horrible, bed-bound or total care, that sort of thing. Now, if we want to keep people moving, we want to keep them working, farming, playing with their grandkids, traveling, whatever they want to do, we want them to be able to do that. And maybe you're all going to have 2 years at the end where things are a little tougher. So we want to keep people active and out there and doing what they want to do for as long as possible. And this is something that's been found to help.
Seems
So.
like this gives them a purpose.
Right.
Purpose to keep working hard.
Exactly. And when they come to the gym, because it's only for people with Parkinson's, it's, you don't feel like it's a regular gym. They're all treated as athletes. They aren't people with Parkinson's. They're athletes, and they're there to work out. Where if they go to a regular gym, they might feel intimidated by the other people that are in the gym, the 20 and 30-year-olds or whatever. And so they might not want to go, because like, well, I can't do that, or I feel funny walking over to the machines or whatever. So here, everybody's in the same boat. And so everybody's motivated, and everybody motivates everybody else, too.
Is it just for Parkinson's?
Yes. Or one of the Parkinsons Plus diagnoses, yes.
Has there been any crossover from other neurological?
Not in Rocksteady, yeah. There might be some boxing programs out there that aren't Rocksteady that do it. The reason we stay exclusively with Parkinson's is because that's where the research has been. We can say it probably would be helpful for somebody with a stroke, we think, everything we could put together would seem to say it should be, but the research isn't there. So we don't want to say it'll be helpful, because we don't know. So, I'm sorry.
I was just curious about forms of payment. Is it casually? Do
Oh.
insurances help cover it? Medicare?
It's just like joining a regular gym. If you go join a Gold's Gym or fitness center or whatever, so it's all private. Hey, there's no insurance coverage for it, no.
So
You don't have to have a physician order?
You don't have to have a prescription or an order. However, part of the paperwork to join is a physician release, which just means the doctor says it's okay to come. They can even put in restrictions like watch their blood, because they might be on medication that, again, lowers their blood pressure because they tend to have high blood pressure. So watch their blood pressure. They might be on medications that control their heartbeat. So if I think that they're working hard and their heartbeat should be going up, and it's not, it might be medication. So I might be worried going, how come your heart rate isn't going up? So it's just little medical things that the doctor might let me know so that I'm aware of about the person, but they have to sign off for somebody to join. Yeah.
Can therapists go for specialized training in this and bring it into the facilities?
Yes, that's what I did. You can go and have a seat.
Thank you.
You can go and have a seat if you want to. I'm a physical therapist, and I did it on my own because I went to a course for therapists working with the aging population, and that's the first time I saw a video about Rocksteady, and it was like, I got to be part of that. So I did it on my own. It took a while for me to open my gym because I knew that it was a commitment to the people of Parkinson's in my community. It was like getting married. It was a commitment. I couldn't go into it for 2 years, 5 years, and go, I don't want to do this anymore. So it took me a while to decide to make that commitment to do it. But I'm glad. I meet great people. We have a good time, right?
Have you seen effects or negative effects when people, like you said, Dave has an injury to, you said his left shoulder, like is it, and I'm assuming he works more on his right arm or his right shoulder, and he's less, or he's not able to work as hard on his left side. Like, is there negative effects because of that? Like my mom has Parkinson's and she has neuropathy in her right hand, and she actually did rock steady for a short time, but she was having just so much pain
Yeah.
with doing it.
Well, what I would do with her is I just wouldn't be having her do the hitting of the bag. We would just do a lot of other things. I have a station for hand, dexterity, fine motor work for them to do and things like that. So I had another guy who had a lot of arthritis in her wrists and it just wasn't comfortable. So I just had her focus on other aspects and not so much on the hitting part. Or I'll say, okay, we can just do what's called shadow boxing. I mean, you can stand out here and do this, you know, and if you're not hitting, if that's what causes the pain, is the hitting, I mean, it might be that you're still having pain because of the movement, but they could also do it slower. I mean, just for the range of motion, the fluidity of movement, you know, we're not going to get the same benefits, but really we need to work, again, we'll talk about this, we need to work on a lot of other things. And so I can spend a lot of time on somebody's balance and not so much on hitting bags. So I believe a good coach can adjust to something like that. Okay, all right, let's get into this. How much time do I have?
9 minutes.
Oh, no. All right. Well, we'll go quick, okay? Again, Rock City Boxing was started in Indianapolis by an attorney who had young onset. He had a friend who was a police officer who boxed as training for himself. And so he said, come on, Scott, get him out of his depression and stuff, and I'll teach you how to box. And he did, and he found that his symptoms were less after a couple months. So he's intrigued by this and decided that I've got to share this with other people with Parkinson's. He hired a professional woman boxer. She's a three-time world champion female boxer, lives in Indianapolis. She now oversees the program. Some of the early research was the Cleveland Clinic Study, is what it's called. They did bicycle exercise 3 times a week for 2 months. They let people ride just at whatever speed they wanted to ride at, voluntary. But they used other people that were a forced rate using a bike. It was like a tandem bike, and so the front person was actually pedaling at a predetermined speed, so the person in the back had to go that fast. And they found that this forced intense exercise was a more effective therapy. Now, some people criticized the study and said, well, the person in the back was just riding along. They really weren't doing, you know, anything. And so they redid part of the study, but they put EMG leads on the muscles, and they found they were working. They weren't just passively walking or riding along. This is the most important one. Again, I'm not going to go through all the details. This was the first major study out of the University of Indianapolis in 2011. The head researcher, Stephanie Combs Miller, she was Stephanie Combs at the time, but they did a case study of people, and they're talking about just boxing training, but they used boxers at Rock City Boxing. So what they did, again, you can read through it, but the gist is they measure, and I do this with my assessments. I have I do about 4, maybe 5 different what we call outcome measure tests, which are research legitimate objective tests that we use to measure someone's abilities. So I'm looking at how many times can you do this in 30 seconds? How long does it take you to do this or that activity? So you get numbers, how many, how long. So you test them. They were in Rock Steady then for I think 2 years, a year and a half or 2 years. And then they retested, and they retested at 6 months, you know, all the way through. So what they found was positive changes, because we do a whole body approach, multi-directional reaching, stepping, agility, drills, but everybody demonstrated that even at 24 and 36 weeks post attendance at the gym, when they tested them, they still had improvements. So even though they weren't doing the exercises at Rock City anymore, or they weren't doing them as part of the study, that they still had improvements afterwards. So that's important. Now, a lot of my boxers will say if they've gone, like surgery or vacation or something, they can tell the difference when they come back if they haven't been. So it's just like with any training, you're going to lose your effects if you don't stay with it. So it's going to have to be something they need to do for a long time. So you can go to rockcityboxing.org is the headquarter information. What we know now, you'll find is anything you read, I don't care where you read it anymore, it's a standard fact that exercise is just as important as medicine. Some people even say more, so more important than medicine. Exercise has to be part of the Parkinson's person's life. So it's important for them to get something they like to do, or with people they like to do it, because they need to be doing it, okay? Starting early after the diagnosis is important, but it's never too late. So Dave, you started Rocksteady when after your diagnosis?
Couple months,
Yeah,
maybe.
couple
A month,
months.
maybe.
My young onset was diagnosed in May and he started in June. And I would say, that's awesome, that's great. But I have people that have had it for 10 years and start coming, that's fine too. But the earlier the better, because again, what we're trying to do is neuroprotective, so we want to keep somebody at that level. You know, and so if they're good, let's keep them there as long as we can. Again, finding something that you enjoy. We talked about this high intensity, high velocity force. That's the key for controlling symptoms. Okay, this just kind of, and I'm sorry, I knew this would probably happen, it doesn't line up exactly, but we're training like boxers train. Boxers don't just box to train. You know, you've seen them skipping rope, you've seen them using bicycles, running, all kinds of stuff, okay? So people with Parkinson's need the same thing. They have tremors, and the boxers do the same thing for eye-hand coordination, bradykinesia, the slowness of movement, speed of movement, rigidity, flexibility, postural stability, optimal balance. You know, all these things, I mean, the same thing that boxers are doing for boxing, we're doing to help someone with Parkinson's. So we use all those areas of training, and even the secondary symptoms. Again, for Parkinson's, it's cognitive issues, depression. I've seen remember the MOCA I talked about, the cognitive level scale? I've seen it actually go up a couple points with people after they've been in the program. So that's improving. So boxers also work out to improve their mental focus, reduce stress, and improve mood. So what we're talking about is what we're trying to improve is what we call functional fitness. Walking better, falling better. We teach people how to fall. We don't want them to be afraid of the floor. Make a friend of the floor. It's okay if you're on the floor. What do you do about it? Increasing rotation. The first movement most people with Parkinson's get is loss of what we call axial rotation around the spine. So again, that's what boxing is going to do, is get that moved up, and some of our cool down exercises do that. Voice activation. You know, we do some voice exercises in our warm-ups, but we try to have fun doing it. We laugh, we make jokes, we, help each other. So again, some other additional resources that you can get just for Parkinson's in general. Again, I tell people stick with the main websites. You know, don't get off on the internet on some tangent. Somebody that says they cure Parkinson's, that sort of thing. So this is what I would consider the four top. Michael J. Fox, American Parkinson's Disease Association. The headquarters for Illinois is Chicago. Headquarters for Missouri is St. Louis. But because we are, you can use resources. We use St. Louis a lot more than Chicago. The Parkinson's Foundation, which again I said I'm an ambassador for the Parkinson's Foundation, or the Davis Finney Foundation. He is also a young onset person with Parkinson's who's founded this. He was a bicycle racer. And won many, many things. So again, just additional resources and references for what I talked about. So again, these are all in there. So okay, how much longer do I have for Q&A? 2 minutes? 1 minute? 2 minutes? Okay. 1.5. 1.5.
But that's not precise.
Okay. Well, we're almost done. Any other questions about what we do?
So with voice activation,
Yeah, voice
do
activation.
individuals with Parkinson's?
I'm sorry?
Do individuals with Parkinson's ever develop dysphagia or difficulty speaking or communicating with sound?
Yeah, definitely.
That is a symptom.
Yeah,
Progressing.
slowness of speaking
So it
or
slows
softer.
down.
Typically it's softer
It doesn't
voice.
project as well.
Right. They'll be talking and people are starting to say, what you say?
So it's not like stuttering, but it's like.
No, it's not
It's just a
stuttering.
weaker.
A weaker voice. Right. Okay.
Thank you.
Oh, sure. Any other questions?